Fantastic. So, hello everybody. Welcome to a presentation on the nodes of Neptune. So, I'm pretty excited to be sharing this material with you today. I had a experience while traveling just recently, and I was watching a specific movie, and one of the things that got my eye and my attention in this film was the nature of spiritualization. And so today's conversation, I wanted to spend some time just looking at the correlation between the planetary node of Neptune and how that function, how that energy, that arc of evolution that we experience, that stream of consciousness that we all deal with as a collective regarding our spirituality, how that's playing out, and correlating some charts, looking at some people that have got some significant alignments with that process, and hopefully inspiring and I think that this is probably the thing that I want to get the most out of this experience, is hopefully inspiring a sense of curiosity into looking at these planetary node placements when observing the natal charts, and seeing and observing and correlating specific patterns in people's lives linked with this planetary node alignment or the nodal axis of Neptune, and what plays out. Like, is there anything significant? And yeah, just it's exciting, a sense of curiosity. So I hope that sounds good today. The other thing that I wanted to bring out as well is within this talk is connecting with the current definition of purpose, and how that has been connected and deeply influenced by this planetary alignment, or this, should I say, this planetary nodal configuration, and how the current astrological transit of Pluto, Saturn, and Mars, not so much Mars in particular because it's a very fast transit, but Saturn, Pluto particularly going over its own nodal axis, i.e. Pluto and Saturn are moving across its own south node itself. And then Neptune sitting in Pisces, and we have the north node currently in Leo, as the south node is in Aquarius. So just to kind of recap what I'm talking about here, I want to take a look at how these certain planetary alignments of Pluto and Saturn over their own south node, Neptune in Pisces, and the current nodal axis, the moon of the nodes, being in Aquarius and Leo. So making an interesting correlation to those symbols and how that ties in with planetary nodes, and in particular the nodal axis of Neptune. Okay, so I've got some slides, and I'm going to share that with everybody today. Hopefully we can get some Q&A as well if there is time. Okay. So I just want to make sure that, okay, hold on. It says, please, can you see everything on the screen at the moment, Linda, or no? I know my Zoom does this. Okay.
Yes, it's pretty good.
Okay, great. So we've got presentation by myself, SΥmµN, and this is for an EA Zoom meeting on the 4th of April, 2018. And we're looking at the planetary nodes of Neptune. Okay. I love this picture, to be honest, because it really captures the essence of, I just want to make sure, again, on my screen, it's telling me that it's a different window that's open. Are you seeing the same thing as I'm seeing? So I've specifically chose this picture as my sort of introduction to the planetary nodes of Neptune, because not only does it capture the essence of the Neptunian color that we human beings have decided to align it with, and but also because the essence of today's conversation is an invitation to understand that the human condition in itself, the experience of what it means to be human is a very profound thing to ponder and contemplate. Not only because of the fact that we have galaxies upon galaxies upon galaxies in the vast universe, but also how do we, from a sort of ego perspective, our little personal sense of self that we have, that I call SΥmUN, and how does that personality that gets developed through the conditioning factors of what my parents and what my social economic situation was like, and what types of friends influenced me, and that small little organism of conditioning field that I grew up with, and then that became the latter, in this part of my life, becomes the psychological disposition for how I interact with relationships and with people and life. And for each of us, we have this kind of tone of identity. How does that little tone of identity interface with the vastness of this existence that we call humanity? And where does that bring us to? How does that framework as a collective help us move through the difficulties that we deal with on a day-to-day basis? Something that I'm going to introduce into this conversation today as a part of the planetary node thing, the planetary node of Neptune, is just recently on the 24th of March, we had the March for Lives Matter. And this was in the States, of course, and I think it's a really interesting thing to bring up because it reminds us of a way of being in our life, in our existence as human beings, where we have trauma. And that living in and of itself as a human being has inherently got trauma associated with it. How do we respond to that? How do we find unity? What types of thinking patterns and emotional and psychological complexes do we develop in a unique way that attributes to whether or not we're able to interact with each other with illusions of separation and witness and experience such devastation, and yet at the same time that devastation unifies things within us? So it takes in this particular example with the States and with certain shootings that are taking place over there, the horror, the trauma, the pain, the emotional taxation that occurs on everybody that's involved in something like this. How does that then materialize this huge movement over social media that's organized through social media into an expression of empathy and a need for change in that sense? That arc of human experience is what I really want to capture within the context of these planetary nodes. They're so much bigger than us. They're so much more profound within the subconscious. And yet at the same time, we have these little small identities that are trying to interact with it. And I just find it really, really abstract and Neptunian, just classically Neptunian, where there's intense clarity, but it's so, it's clarity, and yet it is coming through confusion and feelings of overwhelmedness. And this picture really, really captures that in the sense, because of this illusionary state of trying to access something that is deeply healing to us, and yet at the same time can also feel very far-fetched. It's in the distance. Okay, so let's just quickly have a look at the more astrological left brain orientation of this. So as you can see over here, you've got the planetary nodes, and I think I'll just use a little laser pointer over there. So you've got the planetary nodes for everybody. And for today's conversation, we're going to be looking at the planetary nodes of Neptune, which is sitting, the south node, sits between 10 and 14 degrees Aquarius. And the north node is currently between 10 and 14 degrees Leo. Okay. The planetary nodes of Neptune move very, very slowly. So we spend quite a fair deal of time within these placements. And for a little bit of future conversation, remember how I spoke about the south node of Capricorn Pluto is currently at 22 degrees Capricorn. So, over the last couple of, or the last year or so, we've been having this Pluto transit its own south node. And Saturn's been moving over Uranus. Pardon me, not Uranus. Saturn's been moving through Sagittarius in 2015, 16, 17. And of course, it was at some point over that south node of Uranus over there, but that's not a big deal right now. But you can see that these two planetary nodes, we've got very highly activated with transpersonal planets. Pluto being this energy form within our subconscious that exists very, 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 very deeply. And it's moving through its own south node, which is a whole conversation in and of itself right now. So we have, as a collective, and this conversation has been had, I'm sure, in many different ways through different people, but this awareness, this current time frame in which the energetic expression of the collective unconscious is being awoken, and it is coming through us in a very profound way. And these arcs of planetary nodes that are specifically to the Pluto and the Neptune energy, they are not, again, as I said, something that we can understand easily with our minds. I mean, even in this conversation, I know that it's a very, very difficult thing to comprehend. And so I'm going to try to access this with slides today. But I do personally feel that the context of this and the vastness of these planetary nodes and what they symbolize and what they represent within the context of human evolution is intensely deep and is intensely great. And they reveal so much about us. And yet at the same time, to process what that's about, it's a big deal. There's a lot there. So I'm going to move over to looking at this process of our collective spiritual womb. So for a moment, I'd like us to all think about and feel into what it means to be the baby that is forming in the womb for 9 months. We're deeply impressionable. We're deeply affected by outside energetic interference that our parents are dealing with at that stage. We're shaped so much about the way that our environment is interacting with, and the level of toxicity that could be within the context of that environment. And there is an intense surrender that the young baby is enduring. And yet at the same time, there's this protection layer that's around it over there that offers security and nurture and connectivity. I mean, this is one thing that I find really, really profound about the nature of understanding oneness. And this is, again, something I want to get into later down this conversation around discerning spiritual guru oneness and leading into spiritual bypass, and understanding the depth of oneness, as in we all are from the same source. And so we have this umbilical cord that binds us to the energetic expression and interaction of the mother, which is this divine feminine principle through a principle. Not all the feminine in and of itself is going to be deeply connected to the earth. We are, and this is going to get something into as well with the south node over here, our separation, our collective trauma that we carry regarding the separation. So this principle of connecting to this divine feminine, that we are not in this moment. Think about this picture, because I'm going to reference it later on. Think about the nature of this picture. Do you feel that this baby is concerned about world politics, or concerned about what type of car that they need to achieve or accumulate at some point in their life in order to be successful, or defined to be successful, or their life path is going to be dictated by certain events that come through illnesses and sicknesses, or politicians making certain, laws, etc., that bring traumatic upheaval where it has affected people that feel like that decision was not working for their best interest, as an example. Like, all of those things are not present with this state. And it's a beautiful opportunity to connect with the essence of Neptune as the human experience, i.e., that this energetic essence is this unification, that something is pulling us to unify, and we are all returning and wanting to return back to a place in which we originated from. We all came from this place. We were all once developing the essence of our physical form in this place. So it's not a far-fetched thing to grasp that if the totality of what was developing us at this part of our existence is something that we, at a spiritual level, are seeking to return to as the purpose and destiny. And so what are we seeking with these outer planets of Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto? What do these outer planets invoke within us that we surrender to, just as this baby is surrendering to its environment and to the dichotomy of what its parents is going to eat, what the parent, like, we have these things, right? Okay, when you're pregnant, don't eat fish, or all these things, because there is a need to protect the essence of the womb from harmful things that we as human beings have created outside of ourselves. And of course, fish is not something we created outside of ourselves, but you get the point I'm trying to make here. There's that surrender process, and it's deeply vulnerable, deeply, deeply vulnerable, as we have the lifeline connected to the earth. And again, this is another invitation to access the depth of Pluto transiting its own south node in Capricorn. As we look at the ecology of our earth, we look at our own ecology. How many of us are able to access a process of detoxification of our own physical form, in terms of having a balance between the alkalinity and the acidity within our bodies, right? So we're managing our internal ecosystem. Do you feel like you're successful at managing your ecosystem in a way that's optimal for your organs to exist at an optimal rate? Do you feel that your blood is clean? And these are very silly things in that sense. We don't have to live by that. But this is the essence of what this process is dealing with here. Like, are we connected to the body? And in this picture, are we connected to what is our source? And so I connect the body as the umbilical cord to the physical representation of the earth, and therefore being grounded. So I hope that didn't kind of like space out a lot of people over there, but do something positive. Okay, so we have this collective womb, the spiritual collective womb, that we all at some point are returning back to the same origin in which that was creating within us. And this divine intelligence was forming us at this point in time. So again, why would that divine intelligence not work through us throughout our lives as searching for us? And Pluto, Neptune, and Uranus, in my opinion, are these energetic expressions within our charts that are reaching out to us, to the ego, to the Saturnian realm, and saying, hey, we're wanting to bring you deeper into this process of human evolution, or evolution per se. Okay, so this is a really interesting picture, because the first thing that I want to draw attention to is accessing the depth of what it means to really contemplate the understanding of a planetary south node or north node and its arcing axis. In other words, this whole entire axis, this arc of evolutionary direction, that it's like a stream. If you could imagine a rainbow, and on one side of the rainbow, we have this south node, and on the other side, we have the north node, and the arc of collective experiences exists in between those 2 points. And each experience is crystallized within human like memory. And, you know, one of the ways that you can absolutely validate that is through things like Wikipedia as an example, or the History Channel, or even though there are certain distortions within those things, absolutely, you know, Neptune, clarity. But what we're wanting to focus on here is there is this arc of events that contain our relationship, or contain the memories of our relationship to what we symbolized as meaning, as returning to the womb, as this, what is the symbiosis between man and womb? And in this case, spiritual womb. So this picture over here with this peg, I chose 2 pictures, and you'll notice that both pictures have blurred outness with a focus point, right, where there's absolute clarity. So the essence of a planetary node, if we had to access it at the depth, and I invite everybody to really, really see an astrology chart in this way, and maybe you do already if you know that you're working at a deeper level, but this is an invitation for anybody that's new to this, that right now, in this moment, in this present moment right now, we can access the totality of something, an event that is existing within our lives, right? We can access the memory of the 24th of March, where there was the march and the whole entire expression of collective attention around gun control in the States. So this is where our focus is. But what was really interesting while I was having a conversation with, listening to somebody talk about this, they said to me, you know what, it's really interesting that there is an event like this taking place, but this is not the first time that something like this has happened. We've been here many, many, many times, and there's the pegs sitting in the background over there, blurred out, because it's not the present energetic expression of human evolution, in which our relationship to unifying ourselves over something that has represented a trauma, but yet at the same time has been the very catalyst to bring us together to say, hey, by the way, guys, one of the reasons why we're doing this is because of our unity that we don't fully recognize at an ego level as it being something that's more about a deep unconscious drive, a deep unconscious movement that affects the whole entire globe. So this picture over here is representation that we have so many memories within our line. As you can see, the line over here, the string indicates the planetary node of evolution, the arc of multiple experiences that have marked with us, that have pegged with us certain moments in this timeline. And each time we access a memory, we're bringing it into focus. Okay. So this planetary node, when you look at a planetary node, particularly the outer planets themselves, they are very lengthy. It's a very deep process. And so recognizing and understanding that is our capacity to hold focus for one, but remember, like, knowing that there are multiple. And the same thing with this picture over here, narrow depth of field. Now, the main purpose of this picture over here was to illustrate this sense that when we're observing a time frame relative to a planetary node, and in this particular instance, we're dealing with Neptune, we are focusing on a specific point. So when I was doing some research over here, I was looking back at certain, I was trying to see if there were any significant religious wars that were taking place or started or were ignited when there were activations to the planetary nodes of Neptune. And what I came up is that not only was I looking at specific focused points in time and space, I was also able to only really capture the essence of one moment. But it didn't mean that there were multiple experiences existing in different times. So when we look at planetary nodes, just as we look at it with the moon and its nodes, the nodes of the moon itself contain deep, deep memory that is instilled within us that we can access, but only through a narrow focused essence because of the definition of human memory, and that it's a very limited experience. And yet there is this there's depth to it. And so this imagery here is to invoke the essence of depth that exists within nodal axes, but yet at the same time still remembering that this is a very singular life in the sense. Okay. So I'm going to change gears here for a second, and I'm going to use this chart example over here to illustrate something. Okay. So as we know, the planetary nodes of Neptune sit here in Aquarius. They're over there. South node sits there, and the north node sits there. And we have Capricorn making an inconjunct to Leo, and Capricorn makes a trine all the way to Taurus, and Taurus as a sign makes a square to Leo. Okay, now I know this can be a little bit advanced for some people, but in the sense that we have Pisces in conjuncting Leo, Capricorn in conjuncting Leo, forming a yod, and Capricorn and Pisces sextile each other. And so within the context of when you form context, when you form boundary, it's a Saturnian experience. It's Capricorn. And when you fill that boundary with essence or divine inspiration, as literally those words are linked with this yod that I'm talking about over here, you're dealing with the sextile between Capricorn and Pisces. So it's like, in this moment, we have 1 hour and 15 minutes to have a conversation. That's the Saturn boundary that we create here. Within the context of that Saturn boundary, there is an exploration of consciousness, Neptune. And so here we're exploring consciousness within this boundary, and we don't really feel that time is moving. So there's this non-duality that exists within Pisces. And so we find enthusiasm, we find inspiration, we find meaning. And Leo as an archetype is where that sense of destiny is reflected. How do we allow ourselves to, or how does that sense of destiny exist? But on a deeper level, really, it's just about validation. It's about validation of one's needs. Okay, on an individual level, on a subjective level, it's the validation. So it's the illumination of needs. Taurus, and that's why the Taurus archetype is in a triangle here, because it's this wonderful interaction between validation of needs linked with enthusiasm and inspiration that then becomes life direction. So life direction, meaning and needs, when validated, becomes purpose. And it's very clear to us that when you take away conditioning from how we as human beings have moved over the last sort of 6,000 years, where we've developed the personality and the ego and structured it in a way where what we look at, and this is going to be really interesting because I'm going to use this whole thing here, is that we have a split. Okay, we have a split. And so the context of Neptune's nodes, remember that we're holding in our awareness the context of planetary nodes here. What is our spiritual evolution telling us with South Node in Aquarius going into North Node in Leo? What is that spiritual evolution? That's the backdrop of today's conversation. And within the context of that backdrop, there must be, like I showed you with those little pegs, focused periods of time in which definition of human existence has been molded and shaped and intertwined with this deeper unconscious pattern of what does God constitute to us. So right now, as we sit in this world over here, we can see that there is a transition in human spirituality where we're kind of breaking away from this dogma and this kind of association with many lifetimes or lives or years, decades, centuries, under religious conditioning. So if we want to go even deeper into the context, which is something that I really want to invoke with everybody here, here's another layer of it. The actual Virgo Pisces age, and how that Virgo Pisces age has been a backdrop for human evolution through the context of the planetary south node of Neptune and north node of Neptune. And then how that comes together and forms a societal construct of definition that when we get brought into, we get influenced and conditioned by, we get shaped by. And so putting these layers together, we materialize this kind of splitting off where each of us at a deeper level, when we are looking to understand purpose and destiny, we are seeing it as Saturn being the physical limitation that is the karma that is our earth. And each of us has a body that is fixed to the earth, gravity bound, Saturn, karma. And it is a growth cycle that is maturing through us. It is a growth cycle that is allowing us to develop into. So it's like Bradley was talking about in his Zoom meeting on Chiron, and I think the planetary nodes of Chiron as well. And he was talking about Saturn being this feminine energy of the great cycle, where each of us are growing into this maturation. It's not about this whole Saturnian realm that we've defined it in the past through. And this is a really beautiful thing to grasp here, because the Saturn realm, or the Capricorn realm that we're referring to here, is what is the unfolding life direction that has already kind of been set in stone pre this birth. I mean, that's one of the reasons why you can look at evolutionary astrology and observe the nature of what type of life the soul has kind of set up in order for it to evolve through. So when we look at the Saturnian context in this chart over here, purpose and destiny on one side is linked with how we are maturing and how the cycles of our own emotional development are materializing relative to transits. And the Neptunian part here is an invitation to deeply surrender into it, and to recognize that with Pisces, just as the symbol illustrates to us, there's a merging of worlds between the subconscious and the conscious, the mystical and the physical, the bonding between the two. And then when those two archetypes are being merged together in a form, we're unifying spirit and matter. And when we're unifying spirit and matter into an alignment, we create, well, not create, but we materialize alignment of purpose and destiny, which is then linked with, hey, this is this path I'm walking on, which maybe has nothing to do with the externalization of our sense of direction, which I'll get into with the Capricorn archetype, the distortion. So when we are in alignment, well, not in alignment, pardon me, when we are seeing our lives unfolding, Capricorn, Saturn, in a synchronized way that is really operating just as it did when we were, in the womb, and this creative intelligence was saying, hey, by the way, I'll put everything together in the way that it needs to be, and I will provide you with all the enzymes, and I'll provide you with all the natural things that you need. You just chill back, surrender into the vulnerable state of allowance, Neptune. And when that takes place, all of the needs, Taurus, are fulfilled and met. And so when that fulfilling process is met, and we allow ourselves to become observing of our destiny unfolding relative to this path based on the spirit that's moving through us, we actually become, in a sense, awoken by these outer planets of Pluto, Neptune, and Uranus, and awoken to the essence of our inner sanctuary that is our journey, that is our deeper, meaningful purpose, this destiny. And yet, what has happened is that through the last 6,000 years, and in particular through things like religion, and again, you must remember that right now in this conversation, we're talking about the Virgo-Pisces axis. and this age. And so when you go into this Virgo Pisces age, we can begin to see the remnants of what that energy was representing to us, in the 1960s, with many Pluto and Virgos coming into this world and saying, I went to school and my mom and dad believed in religion, and sort of like we went to church and a Catholic school, etc. And now when you talk to a lot of children that are kind of born right at this point in time, or even a little bit earlier, maybe even Pluto and Scorpios, and even in my case a little bit, that essence wasn't as dominant as it was sort of in the turn of the century. And so you can see this essence of energy dissipating relative to energy changes. And the key here with what I'm bringing into attention is that you can just look at, with this planetary node of Neptune, that was once symbolized our spirituality. Our oneness was through this Virgo Pisces axis of God is an existential being. And because of that being the case, through our deep psychological state of looking outside of ourselves to try and make sense of this mystical experience that we call life, we have developed this construct of an outer authority that then became the driving force for our collective awareness to place our security in something outside of ourselves, that then has become what then has become this process of fighting and conflict and wars and a deep power play, where the territory, Capricorn, has been what has represented our pride, Leo, that has then been triggered by our deep need for survival, Taurus, that then becomes this process of duality, of separation, Neptune. And so when we form into the Maya, so the ego is healthy here. So we go through this process of ego in which we come out of the womb and into the world, and all of a sudden the baby is met with, and we are met with this reality of, this is what we define, human race, we define God through this way. And progressively this way edges out the essence of what brought us here to begin with, what is going to guide us to our ultimate purpose. We edge it out. And by edging it out, we separate ourselves from the essence of that spiritual womb, to the point where we don't even know that we are all unified in that process. And then through that, we begin to make attachments to things that have meaning to us through external things. So we have toys, and then eventually we develop bank accounts, and then eventually it's a car or it's a house. And then through that point in time, the story of South Node of Neptune in Aquarius moving through to the North Node in Leo becomes this individuation process where each of us has things that are unique to us, that are individual, and we define that as our purpose. So ambition and success becomes the conditioning field for how the South Node of Neptune, or the planetary nodes of Neptune, move through it. So instead of us finding our own individual and unique creative process that's unique to us as it's unfolding for us, we define our spirituality through the things that separates us from the other person, that ultimately becomes the very thing that says, hey, you have more than me. I don't like that with inside of myself. I feel inadequate. I feel separate. I feel, whatever you want to use with regards to the Aquarius Leo axis. And because of that, we then look at other people and say, well, like I said, you've got more than me. I'm going to go on a quest to build a better career, to get right to the top. And if it means not spending all of my time at home, like with my children who I love the most, but I have to make these big choices because I've decided to do this career path that has led me on this cycle of career and ambition, so I can have the bigger house to fulfill the ego that needs to be cultivated because of vanity. North Node, South Node. South Node Aquarius, North Node Leo, Neptune, vanity, narcissism. All of this type of stuff has been rooted because of the way that we've been evolving has placed this purpose and destiny outside of ourselves. And because of that being the case, we're searching for it in an existential void. And we keep on searching for it. So the people that write the books, how to find purpose, and so on and so forth, or the 12 steps to doing this, or this is what, it's like we consistently keep, and again, this is, I'm not speaking for everybody, so if, you know, but we keep on consistently seeking it in an existential place. And by looking for it there, we're always in the trap of feeling lost or having no meaning. And at some points in time, we're going to go through an internal transit like a Saturn return that will create an intense sort of involution within our psyche that will invite us to reflect upon our own lives. And there could be lack of meaning in there. But know that that is a cycle of life that we're going through that is setting us up for the next one, because we're recognizing that the womb of our own spiritual growth is moving through us. So just as the tree knows that its unique blueprint is inherent within its seed, just as the human being's blueprint is inherent within its own birthing process within the 9 months of the womb. So this is an invitation with Pluto transiting its own nodes, the North Node in Leo, the South Node in Aquarius, and arguably Venus transiting Taurus right now, that this kind of whole entire complex of invitation to see that our humanitarian experience, our collective evolution is shifting. And that's why you'll see a lot of the stuff on the internet right now around how to heal narcissism and narcissistic abuse and all of this type of stuff, because at the end of the day, what we're dealing with here is deeply, deeply traumatized experiences that we all carry on some level because of the separation from within the ego and the duality within the ego, and that need to unify it. And this is a time frame right now in which those portals for that awareness is emerging through, and we can all access that right now through a deep state of reflection of what it means to connect with our own inner process, and recognizing that within ourselves we have this creative force that's moving through us. We call this spirit. You know, this is not a new thing. It's not like, oh, wow, we're sitting here today and we're going like, hey, this is new. It's like many ancient teachings and wisdom scriptures talk about this process. It's just that right now, there is a beautiful invitation to remember and remind ourselves of the time where we can forget that our creative process was already sorted out in the first 9 months. So why would it not be there for the rest of our lives? Okay. What you're looking at right now is the chart of the tsunami that took place in 2004, December the 25th, in the Indian Ocean. And the south node of Neptune sits at 13 degrees, 10, 14, and 13 degrees. Look where Neptune is. Look where Uranus is. And what I find really, really interesting about this dynamic over here as well is that not only was this an interesting period of time in terms of awakening the collective spirit, look at I chose this picture specifically because I wanted to capture everybody's imagination around the devastation that took place on that day. And this is not something that is completely isolated. There have been many, 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 many experiences that have brought humanity to a realization that the forces of nature, and in particular this case, right, Neptune, water, tsunami, right, the nature of this devastation is profound. Just as recently within the States, I think it was last year with the hurricanes, right? Same thing. The same tornadoes and typhoons that hits Indonesia, the same collective experiences and famine that hit certain countries in Africa. But this is interesting because look at the symbols of Uranus in Pisces and Neptune in Aquarius, right? Pluto is also in Sagittarius. Look at all those symbols that are activating within the context of the Sag archetype over here. And we see this entire event take place where when you read the research, or when you do into research and you look up what type of material has been imprinted within our collective consciousness regarding that experience, you'll see that they correlate this to be one of the most profound humanitarian pull together. It's like people will pull together from all over the world to help out with this experience, because the essence of what I'm trying to capture here is that the south node of Neptune sits there, and you have this Neptune transits its own south node and activating this portal that brings us into a state of deep union of like, oh my God, even though we're in a different place in the world, here's this event that takes place and it unifies us together. And yet devastation, Aquarius, trauma, brings us to this point. It's like almost a comedy on some level, that we're always united by something that's deeply traumatizing. And so it awakens the collective spirit. Again, this collective spirit, the humanitarian events that take place during that period of time. Deeply interesting. South node of Neptune, the south node of the moon, currently there, right? And again, we've got this dynamic of, this was happening March for Our Lives, the 24th of March, south node of the moon sitting at 13 degrees Aquarius, same thing. Now, the difference here is that in 2004, social media was not as impactful or around or anchored into the collective as it is today. And again, I want to invite this process. During the time that Uranus and Neptune made a conjunction in Capricorn, was the first time that we started to see the internet begin to become present. And yet at the same time, as Neptune and Uranus move through its own signs, we see the progression and the beginning phase of what would later on become the platform that we use here today. That when Zoom meeting gets recorded and it gets uploaded to YouTube, Neptune dissolving barriers and boundaries and everybody having access to it from all over the world at any point in time, that there is no specific boundary in time. There is timelessness completely. And that each person, relative to where they are in their own individuated process, Capricorn, can access a Zoom meeting that to them was happening live right there. But yet when it was recorded, as an example, was completely different. Also, the process of the collective airwaves, Aquarius, right? We talk about this Aquarius age. We talk about the Aquarian energy of pouring the water bearer, right? Electrifying higher consciousness. Well, think about this in the sense that at this point in time, we had certain technology that was allowing us to access and to get to this country with many, many people unifying, right? And at that point, there were certain like mobile telephones and stuff that we could connect. But think about what actually happened when the south node of the moon accesses the exact same point, with Neptune now being in Pisces, right? I mean, again, Chiron Sun conjunction, even though that wasn't particularly, it's already past it. It's still connecting to it. That social media brought this thing to the limelight. It was like every single, because it was the youth, right? This is the key here. It was the youth that brought this process to the world. It wasn't like a bunch of adults going like, hey, yeah, we're responsible for this. It's the kids going, oh my gosh, this is the way I see it in my head. It's like, oh my gosh. Like, I think that somebody's needing to take a stand for this. And so here's another humanitarian effort that is trying to unify us. And again, Neptune trining Jupiter over there. We're trying to heal this collective trauma around violence and abuse and our boundaries being dissolved and destroyed. Whereas in the previous one, it was all about nature and feeling this collective fear that we have. And this is the point here. It's like, when the tsunami hits, it awakens within us this deep, deep collective cellular memory that we have towards nature and how destructive it can be and how much fear we carry within ourselves because it killed 250,000 people. I mean, that's not something you just go, oh yeah, just like with the World War. We have this memory within our subconscious, and that's what I talked about with the peg and the picture of the focus, is that we have these events, and depending on which type of transits that are connecting with the connection of the nodal axis, the planetary nodes of Neptune, will dictate which type of event comes up. And this one was specifically around the violations of our own feelings of sovereignty and safety, and how we can protect ourselves, and what types of laws and regulations we put in place that either serve us or don't serve us. Again, how are we unified versus feeling of separation? Because there's a separation in that experience, the trauma through that separation, and yet at the same time it brings us to unify us. That process of Leo. Changing a little bit of the storyline over here. I know we've got a couple of minutes left. So what's interesting about this picture, and you can see different variations of them in the world. I think Alex Gray even did one picture where we had a tree, and it was this energetic expression. I mean, this is energy. This type of imprint, in my opinion, is a sort of invitation to recognize the resonance, the energetic resonance of a Neptune South Node, North Node process. Because on one hand, we have this picture in which the earth, the world, the Capricorn symbolism is materializing it through that process of purpose and destiny and vanity. You know, it's all about the things that we have and how those things relate to our sense of accomplishment, ambition, right? What we can accomplish, not what we can accomplish, what we can accumulate. And so how do we use the resources that are given to us that eventually will consume us? Or do we look at the world from the other side, in which there is unification, where everything is unified within one? So we are living in an ecosystem versus an ego system. And again, with the planetary nodes of Neptune being activated by the South Node of the Moon right now, and Pluto on its own South Node, and of course Saturn moving across the same area, we are invited to observe the nature of what types of definitions we have used, and how that definition has become the vehicle for our evolution spiritually. So do we continue to seek our sense of personal definition through separation, and therefore like expanding our evolutionary trauma that we carry within ourselves? Or do we have enough experiences that awakens progressively deep feelings of emotion that unify us, not in a new age type of way where it's like, oh, I have emotional pain, I have trauma, but I'm going to numb those emotions out using technology, South Node of Neptune, through taking 1 billion Instagram pictures of myself because that's going to make me look cool, versus feeling and acknowledging the inner void that exists within us, because the ego is so rooted in separation that it can't honestly feel love unless it is found within. So it keeps on searching for love outside of ourselves. It keeps on searching for validation outside of ourselves. And so we have this interesting dynamic where unity and oneness is found through technology, and yet the absence of the actual essence of what that womb is about is lost. So we are at a very, very interesting crossroads. And I think that for most of you that are sitting here talking and listening to this over here going, yeah, but we know this, it's the rest of the collective that we're trying to get this message to. I just think that it's an invitation here to know that at some point, these outer planets of Neptune, Uranus, and Pluto, because again, Pluto is going to evolve through its own South Node and North Node. And of course, Neptune, wherever it sits right now, it's in Pisces, it's evolving through its own nodal axis. So the South Node of Neptune in Aquarius, North Node and Leo is being channeled through Neptune in Pisces. So there is an intense opening of energetic movement through Neptune's nodal axis that is being influenced by a Neptunian field, which is, wow, we're trying to find that collective oneness. I think that's the reason why there is so much spirituality merging out into the internet right now, that comes through technology. And I think even at some point, there was a talk from Kim Marie where she was talking about the sextile between Uranus and Neptune, or the connection between the two, and how technology can serve our spirituality. This is a key component here to Neptune here, because there is a, remember that these planetary energies of Neptune in Pisces and Uranus in Aries are on the surface, even though they are deep within themselves. And then you have this contextual background of energetic vibration that is so incredibly enormous and large that encapsulates hundreds and hundreds and hundreds upon year, or like thousands upon years of our collective evolution is stored within that memory pool. It's tremendous. So we're trying to, at this point in time, we're faced with this interesting dilemma of these planetary energies of again, Pluto, Neptune, Uranus, saying, hey, you know, humanity, you've got to sort this out. Otherwise, you know, you're just going to consume yourself. So to slow things down over here and to just kind of end off my conversation, I chose a couple of charts, and I just want to illustrate here. Yes, they are specifically chosen with these types of people. There are many, many people that are born with this type of symbolism that have not achieved the sort of material or sort of worldly perception that exists out there. But I find it really, really interesting that people like Deepak Chopra, for instance, sits with the Pluto at 13 degrees Leo, and the Saturn at 8 degrees Leo, literally on top of Neptune's north node, the planetary node of Neptune, north node, situated there. And again, really, really interesting with this is that, again, the planetary ruler, well, the actual nature of the Neptune nodes is going to be evolving through Neptune itself. So he's got that in that Libra energy, right? Relatability, relation dynamics. And yeah, he does have a Uranian message, just as I'm sure Jeffrey Wolf Green and the person that brought human design. I don't think it's a coincidence that these two people, and Deepak Chopra, have got this energy, this Pluto connection here, the Saturn connection here on Neptune's north node. And I was talking to Mark Jones the other day when I was saying to him, you know, I think that there's something really interesting about the Pluto Leo generation and their connection to the planetary nodes of Neptune, especially because their Pluto's land on the north node. Because I've noticed with the Pluto and Leos that there are very two dynamics. Actually, I highly recommend everyone to go watch a TV show on Netflix. I don't know if it's in the States. It's called Frankie and Grace, or Grace and Frankie. And you'll notice that there are two Pluto and Leo souls. One of them followed the route of material worldly success, and the other one followed the world of spiritual, sort of like inward emotional work, etc. And it's a really, really interesting explanation of how the two ways in which Pluto through Leo on its own, on Neptune's nodal axis, revealed the two dimensions that I'm talking about here. You know, you look at people like Greg Braden, for instance. There's another example of somebody that, you know, there's a lot of spiritual kind of people with the Pluto and Leos coming out here and saying, hey, we've got this. There was the guy that developed the neurophone. So much material. Jeffrey Wolf Green, the guy called Ra, who brought human design system through. All of this, it's not a coincidence that they had these symbols on top of this planetary north node. And I don't think it's a far-fetched idea to actually observe their energy as people that encapsulate the essence of this archetypal structure, whether it be through distortion and self-glorification and spiritual guruism, or through the essence of deep, meaningful existence that points back to ourselves, points back to our own creative process. Because both Jeffrey and Rod did that. They were like, here's the spiritual teaching that brings us back to ourselves. Okay, and then you have somebody like Nelson Mandela, for instance. I mean, it's radical. Look at this over here. He's got his Mercury and his Saturn and his Neptune all sitting there. I mean, the Neptune's a little bit off the planetary node, but at the end of the day, it's still close enough, in my opinion, to represent a soul that came through and transformed and dissolved and tried to unify a country that was deeply, deeply entrenched in its own sort of political narcissism, and how humanity was treated and how that trauma was treated. And what you're dealing with here, you're dealing with the aftermath of a country now and today where the trauma of what that period of time represented and how those karmic ramifications are bleeding through into 2018. You just have to look at the news in South Africa right now to observe that. And again, Mercury, Saturn, you know, and there was a destiny. I mean, this person spent so much time, he spent this time in Robben Island, which is this sort of jail. And what I find interesting is that in the collective consciousness, this energy is present within us today. This person in the collective field is iconic. He owns a space within our emotional center that is an authority figure that says we need to be embracing each other versus separating each other. Something really interesting to contemplate about that symbolism over there. And then finally, something completely different. I'm sure many of you are aware of Timothy Leary. Now, he only actually has Neptune, again, 13 degrees. He only has Neptune in that third house, in that Leo archetype. But what I found interesting about this person is that he was wanting to bring through and advocate the use of medicinal drugs, i.e. Psychedelic drugs, as a way of therapy to heal experiences. And I found this really interesting because when you deal with sort of trauma, or when we deal with frozen, fractured emotions that separate us, we're isolated and cold within ourselves, and we're disconnected, right? North Node, Leo, South Node, Aquarius, of the planetary nodes. And here we have technology that comes into our field, and we're more on our telephones than we are in human contact. And so there is a connection, but it's through this detached perspex glass. And this person brings through this Neptune on this North Node in Leo. And it's like, in order for us to heal the deep traumatizing experiences that we carry from prior lives and from early life imprinting, it is about the therapy in Leo. It's about the acknowledgement and the validation of that. It's about talking through that. That's why things like therapy, as an example, can be helpful to a certain degree when it comes to trying to process things. And here's this Neptunian energy on this North Node in Leo saying, here's a way that I feel could be beneficial to heal these certain things. And it's going to come through a Neptunian realm, which is psychedelics. And it's on that North Node as well. So interesting thing there to contemplate as well regarding that. And again, the essence of what I'm trying to share with everybody is the energy is coming through these planetary alignments, and they materialize in different ways, and yet the essence of it is still the same. We're trying to find unity in ourselves, and yet unity is most always found in trauma experiences that reminds us of a deeper energetic experience that we have. So it awakens us to higher realms, and yet at the same time, it reminds us of our vulnerability. Okay. So any questions, anybody want to talk to me and interact with me in that way, go ahead. That's the slide source. And thanks very much for that. I appreciate the time that you've given me over here, Linda, and everybody else.
Hello, SΥmµN, this is Patrice. Thank you very much. That was excellent. I have two questions really, but the one that's most I'm wondering about is what about personal planets? I know you were doing the wide threads.
Yeah.
On those North Node, particularly, the North Node in Leo or an angle. Have you observed anything of that coming up in your readings?
Absolutely. I mean, I honestly only have really been beginning to explore this at depth within the last 3 months and stuff, but periodically interacting with it. But what I can say to you is that if there are these personal planets that are connecting to it, I have noticed within people that there's been this strong connection to imagery and archetypes within their lives, whether it be through uncles, whether it be through their parents, that would symbolize an essence of that energy, of that Neptunian energy. In fact, I'm working with somebody right now that has their own nodal axis on the Neptune nodal axis themselves. And they were like, you know, their whole entire mission has been that they know the Bible in a way that is different from how it's been prescribed through religious things. And so they were brought up in this really religious, heavy, indoctrinated home. And yet they were like, but that's not what the Bible's about. And to me, I would sort of invite this essence of this person is bringing something into this physical form from prior lives in which they've walked along. They even talk about this, and this could be a grand delusion as well. So, you know, at the same time, it's, you have to really, really be discerning about this. But they, and I just wanted to make a note over there, they actually had the Sun and Mercury on the North Node. So that was the personal planet type dynamic of Neptune there in Leo. And they were like, but I remember these spiritual masters, you know, Yogananda and all of that. Like I have a personal relation to them in my dreams and stuff. And that's where I feel the essence of remembering the deeper essence, like the deeper spiritualness of, such a bad way to do it, but that's Mercury retrograde for me right now. Just a remembering of something deeper than what is physically here and what we have defined with ourselves in here. So I hope that kind of like answers that question or attempts to do it in some way.
Yes, it did. Thank you so much.
Great. Thank you, Simon. That brings us to the end of your meeting. I want to thank you very much for demonstrating how the nodes of Neptune operate through time. And personally, I think that's an incredible feat to accomplish at this Mercury retrograde. So congratulations on that. So thank you from all of us. See you next time.
Thanks very much. Take care, everybody. Bye.
Thank you, Simon. It was wonderful.
Thank you. That was excellent.